Just a minute. Fine, fine. So sorry for the delay. So good morning, everyone. My name is Arafat. I teach history at the textbook platform. So this is the fifth class on the French Revolution series. So far, we have had five sessions. In fact, we have had four sessions on the topic the French Revolution. So we have spent enough time on this topic because this topic is a very lengthy topic. So far, this the topic which we will be discussing today is the rule of Napoleon. So which is a part of the French Revolution. So when we use the term French Revolution, we are basically referring to the events that have unfolded in France between 1789 to 1850. The time period between 1789 to 1815 is often referred to as the period of French Revolution, is often referred to as a French Revolutionary period. So far we have discussed the causes for the uh, outbreak of a French Revolution in 1789. Then thereafterwards, we have discussed the rule of France by the National Constituent Assembly that was between 1789 to 81. Then we have discussed the rule of France by Legislative Assembly between 1781 to 82. Then thereafterwards, France was ruled. This is third, this is fourth. Then France was ruled by national convention. We call this as the period of national convention between 1782 to 85. I told you that this national convention is the most revolutionary phase of the French Revolution, most revolutionary phase of the French Revolution. Then the fifth phase is what we call as the rule of the Directory, which is between 1785 to 89. So even in fact, in the last class, we have had a discussion on the rule of the Directory. Okay, point. So the Directory happens to be the last phase of the Republic in France. So basically, with the end of the Directory, uh, Republic in France also came to an end, almost at a point. Then the sixth phase of the French Revolution is what we call as the period of Napoleon. So what we are discussing today is basically the sixth phase of a French Revolution. So basically in 1789, I'm not 89, I'm sorry, I'm extremely sorry, 1782 to 1789 to 91. I just messed up some data here. So second phase, the third phase, take a look at it. The period of legislative assembly is between 1789 to 91. 89 to 91. National convention is between 90. Sorry, the point is 91. The time period of a legislative assembly is between 1791 to 92. The time period of national convention is 1792 to 95. 85, 1792 to 95, and the time period of the directory is between 1795 1795 to 99. That's the time period of the directory. So basically, the directory also became unpopular by the end of 1799. The directory also became unpopular. So therefore, One of the members of the directory, or in fact, one of the director by name Abbasius, conspired with Napoleon, leading to the overthrow of the directory. Basically, in 1799, a coup was organized by Napoleon, and this coup was organized by Napoleon with the support of one of the director by name Abbasius. This is what we have discussed in our previous class. So the in that coup, the directory was overthrown and Napoleon began his rule. So basically, we call this period as the period of the consulate. Call this period as the period of the consulate. So basically, after the overthrow of the directory, a consulate was established in France. So this consulate comprised of three consuls. It comprised of three consuls, but of the three consuls, the first consul exercised most of the powers. So in this consulate, Napoleon was appointed as the first consul. So let me repeat this point once again. After the overthrow of the directory, a consulate was established in France. This consulate, the executive power in the consulate was kept in the hands of three consuls. But though there were three consuls, the most of the powers were kept in the hands of the first consul. So in 1799, Napoleon was appointed as the first consul. The point. So basically, between 1799 to 1815, France was under the control, France was under the rule of Napoleon. So during this period, Napoleon ruled France in two capacities. One as the consul, then he started ruling France as the emperor. So basically, Napoleon's rule between 1799 to 1815 can be discussed in two parts, can be discussed in two phases. Between 1799 to 1804, he acted as the first consul, but in 1804, he declared, that is, Napoleon declared as the emperor of France. He ruled France as the emperor till 1850. So we will be discussing the rule of Napoleon in two halves. First as the first consul, and later as the emperor of France between 1804 to 1815. The point. So first, let us first discuss all the events. Then let us spend time discussing as to how questions could be asked from this particular topic. But this topic, first let us take a look at the overall picture of this particular topic. Then we will start discussing how questions could be asked in the mains examination from this particular topic. So once again, a very good morning, everyone. Now take a look at Napoleon's rule as the first consul. That is between 1799 to 1804. Let us first discuss Napoleon's rule as the first consul between 1799 to 1804. So basically, between 1799 to 1802, Napoleon ruled as the first consul, but by 1802 AD, Napoleon felt emboldened and declared himself as a consul for life. In 1802, basically in 1799, he became first consul, but in 1802 he felt emboldened and declared himself as the as a consul for life. That is, as long as he was alive, he declared that he would remain as a consul throughout his life. And people did not raise any voice. People did not question his decision. In 1804, he felt even more emboldened and declared himself as the emperor of France. He declared himself as the emperor of France. And once again, people did not uh, people did not question this decision. In fact, after declaring himself as the emperor, uh, a plebiscite was organized, and in that plebiscite, people of France voted in favor of a monarchy in France. So why did the French Revolution broke out? The French Revolution, in a way, broke out against monarchy. Basically, France was a monarchy since till 1789. The people of France got fed up with the monarchy, and hence they revolted against monarchy in 1789 and declared France as a constitutional monarchy in 1789. So basically, between 1789 to 1791, France essentially remained as a constitutional monarchy. But in 1791, people of France once again revolted and declared France as a republic. So effectively, from 1791 onwards and till 1804, France remained a republic. From 1791 to 1804, France essentially remained a republic. This is what actually happened. That's the point. But the point is, in 1804, Napoleon declared himself as emperor. He put this decision to a public vote, and people voted in favor of monarchy once again in France. Why did people come to this decision? We will be exploring that point later. But first, let us take an overall picture, take a look at the overall developments during the French Revolution. That's the point. So, in his capacity as the first consul, basically in his capacity as the first consul between 1799 to 1804, Napoleon undertook numerous reforms. In his capacity as the first consul between 1799 to 1804, Napoleon carried out numerous reforms, and these reforms of Napoleon can be discussed in two categories. One is the internal reforms, and the second is external reform. Told you just his capacity as the first consul, Napoleon carried out numerous reforms which can be discussed in two categories. One is the internal reforms, the second is the external reforms. Let us first discuss the internal reforms. Later, we will proceed and discuss the external reforms as well. Internal reforms. So, basically, the internal reforms carried out by Napoleon are indeed praiseworthy. The internal reforms carried out by Napoleon tried to heal the wounds of the people inflicted by revolution. Let me repeat this point once again. The internal reforms carried out by the Napoleon were indeed very, very praiseworthy, and the internal reforms carried out by Napoleon tried to heal the wounds of the people inflicted by the revolution. What do I mean by that one? I told you the French Revolution broke out in 1789. So, since the outbreak of the French Revolution, numerous wars were fought in France. As a result, there was a lot of bloodshed. These wars had resulted in a lot of bloodshed. It had also these frequent wars in France since the outbreak of the French Revolution in 1789 pushed the French economy into doldrums. So, as a result of the frequent wars fought in France since 1789, the entire French economy was in shambles. So, unemployment was on the rise, inflation was very high, people did not have enough to eat, etc. etc. So, the whole point which I'm trying to convey is since the outbreak of the French Revolution, the numerous wars were fought, resulting in too much of bloodshed. The economy was also in a bad shape. So, therefore, immediately after becoming the consul in 1799, Napoleon initiated a host of internal reforms, and these internal reforms uh, began to uh, began to uh, benefit the people to a very great extent. And these internal reforms carried out by Napoleon, in a way, tried to heal the wounds of the people inflicted by the revolution. The point. So, what reforms he carried out? What was the impact of all of these reforms? Let us understand them one after the other. Let us understand all of these reforms one after the other. The point. So, the first is the administrative reforms. First is administrative reforms. So, the administrative reforms carried out by Napoleon were based on centralization. So the administrative reforms carried out by Napoleon aimed at creating a highly centralized administrative system. They aimed at creating a highly centralized administrative system. This was because in this administrative system that was created by Napoleon, the perfects, the sub-perfects, and mayors headed departments, cantons, and communes. So basically, in the administrative reforms which he had undertaken, he appointed perfects, sub-perfects, and mayors as heads of departments, cantons, and communes. So basically, departments, cantons, communes are administrative regions. So he appointed perfects as the heads of the departments, the sub-perfects as the heads of cantons, and mayors as the heads of the communes. So basically, before to that of 1799, that is before Napoleon became the first consul, all these officers of different administrative regions were were uh, were elected by the local official. They were basically elected by the people. So basically, before to 1799, the officers of these various administrative regions were elected by the people. So basically, he abolished the system of election for the appointment of officials to the various administrative regions, and he himself directly started appointing officials at a point. So basically, the Napoleon's administrative systems, administrative reforms were aimed at creating a highly administrative, a highly centralized administrative system. Because earlier the heads of the various administrative regions were elected by the people, but he abolished the system of election, and the officers of those administrative regions began to be directly appointed by Napoleon himself. And these officers who were appointed were made responsible for enforcing laws, they were made responsible for collecting taxes, and these officers directly reported to Napoleon. They were made responsible for reporting directly to Napoleon's central government. That's the point. So, by doing so, Napoleon brought the entire country under his strict and efficient rule. So, what happened? The French Revolution broke out in 1789. Thereafterwards, system of election was introduced for the appointment of officials to various administrative regions. So the whole point is, after the outbreak of the French Revolution, the heads of departments, cantons, and communes were basically elected by the people. But this election brought too much of chaos. Local autonomy, in a way, began to be misused by the officers who were elected. So the point is, uh, by directly appointing officers to various administrative regions, Napoleon succeeded to a very great extent in reducing local autonomy, and thereby he brought the entire countryside to his strict and efficient rule. So basically, he brought the entire uh, country under his direct and efficient rule as a result of the appointment which he had carried out, uh, as a result of by appointing officers to various administrative regions. So the first reform carried out by Napoleon was administrative reforms. Then he carried economic reforms. I told you, after the outbreak of the French Revolution 1789, the entire economy was in the doldrums. So therefore, immediately after becoming the first consul, Napoleon started focusing on economic reform. In this context, he established a bank known as Banque de France, otherwise referred to as Bank of France in 1880 at a point. So basically, this Banque de France was basically the central bank of France. So after the establishment of this France, with the establishment of this France, credit began to be provided to the people to once again kickstart economic activity at a point. So this bank also played an important role in reducing inflation that was prevailing in France at that point of time. So the whole point which I'm trying to convey is, since the outbreak of the revolution in 1789, there was too much of economic problems, chaos in France, and therefore, immediately after becoming the first consul, Napoleon started concentrating on the economic reforms. In this context, he had established a bank known as Banque de France or Bank of France, which is basically the central bank of France. And this bank started facilitating credit. It started providing credit. It also started providing loans to the government, which the government used to fund both the domestic projects as well as the military campaigns at a point. It also uh, it also uh, it also played a very important role in bringing down inflation in France. So the establishment of the central bank in France in 1800 AD played a very important role in rebuilding the economy after 10 years of revolutionary wars. Basically, the establishment of a central bank in France in 1800 AD helped in rebuilding the economy after years of revolutionary wars. Is Since the outbreak of the French Revolution in 1789, wars have been going on. It resulted in a lot of chaos. So this establishment of the bank played a very important role in once again rebuilding the economy. At a point, that's about economic reforms. This is point A of economic reforms. One more point. Then he also overhauled the entire taxation system. Napoleon, as part of his economic reforms, overhauled the entire taxation system. So, under the new taxation system introduced in 1800 AD, the taxation was made more equitable. The taxation was made more equitable, and under the new taxation system, more tax began to be collected from the wealthier class. At a point. So the point is, under this new taxation system introduced in 1800 AD, taxes were levied more equally, and importantly, more taxes began to be collected from the wealthier class, which was not the case before the outbreak of the revolution. So before to that of 1789, the richer sections of the French society were exempted from taxes, whereas the burden of taxation was largely on the shoulders of the poorer sections of the society. But as part of his economic reforms, he also, that is, Napoleon also carried out taxation reforms. In these taxation reforms, uh, taxes began to be collected. An equitable system of taxation was introduced at a point. So all sections of a society began to be taxed, but particularly from the wealthier sections, more taxes began to be collected. So this was another important reform which Napoleon had initiated after he becoming the first consul. Then third, he also started focusing on infrastructure development. Large number of roads, irrigation canals, railways were constructed within a short span of time under Napoleon's supervision. So within a short span of time, a number of roads, buildings, at a point, network of railways were constructed under Napoleon's supervision. At a point. So this had the positive impact of providing jobs, and stimulating the local economies. The point is, the focus that was laid on creating infrastructure, focus that was given in the creation of infrastructure resulted in employment generation, resulting in stimulation of the local economies. It played an important role in stimulating the local economies. It provided an important role in providing jobs. That is, it succeeded in providing employment to the people. That's the point. So the economic reforms carried out by Napoleon also were very, very successful. Third, Napoleon also started, he also initiated education reforms as well. So Napoleon's education reforms were based on three principles. One, loyalty to the crown. Second, dutiful attitude to the rules of the educational institutions. And third, the third principle laid in the educational reforms that were emphasized in the educational reforms was faith in ethical values preached by the Jesus. So basically, Napoleon initiated a system. Napoleon, after becoming the first consul, initiated education reforms as well. But these educational reforms were based on three principles. One, the educational reforms sought to promote loyalty to the crown. They sought to promote a dutiful attitude uh, to the rules of educational institutions. They also sought to promote. They also sought to promote faith in the ethical values preached by Jesus. So, upon based on these three principles, that education reforms were carried out. So, as part of his education reforms, Napoleon started establishing a host of schools at the level of each commune. Commune is basically the lowest administrative region or administrative area in France at that point of time. So basically, Napoleon, as a part of his education reforms, started establishing numerous schools, such as, say, for example, primary school was established, grammar school, these are basically high schools. Grammar schools were established, technical schools were established, civil services schools were established, military schools, teacher training schools. All of these different types of schools were established at the level of each commune, mind you. So all of these education reforms also became very, very successful during Napoleon's time period. Then Napoleon also initiated judicial reforms as well. So in this connection, Napoleon came up with a code called Napoleonic Code. Napoleonic Code. He came up with this particular code in 1804. So prior to that of 1804, there were a host of laws, LAWS, in France. Prior to that of 1804, there were numerous laws, LAWS, within France. What was lawful in one area was termed unlawful in another area of France. So that was the kind of laws that were in place before that of 1804. So these multiplicity of laws created utter chaos within France. So the point which I'm trying to convey is there were numerous laws within France before to that of 1804. What was lawful in one area became unlawful in another region of France. So these multiplicity of laws created utter chaos within France. So therefore, to overcome uh, the chaos, to overcome this problem of multiplicity of laws, Napoleon codified the entire legal system. In fact, Napoleon uh, went for the codification of the French laws. He codified the French laws at a point. So, replacing all existing laws, Napoleon came up with only one single code applicable for the whole of France, and this legal code became popularly known as Napoleonic Code. So replacing all existing laws, Napoleon came up with one single law applicable throughout the country, called as Napoleonic Code. This Napoleonic Code uh, uh, was enforced from 1804 AD onwards. At a point, so this Napoleonic Code guaranteed rights such as, say, equality of law, regardless of birth or class. It also guaranteed property rights. It abolished feudal privileges. This Napoleonic Code abolished feudal privileges. So basically, I told you before to that of the 1789 French Revolution. So the richer sections of the society were exempted from taxes, whereas the poorer sections of the society, uh, 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 they were under the burden of huge taxation. But the point is, these feudal privileges were abolished under the Napoleonic Code of 1804. That's the point. So, of all the works carried out by Napoleon, uh, this Napoleonic Code undoubtedly is regarded as the most enduring legacies of Napoleon. Let me repeat, of all the works carried out by Napoleon, the Napoleonic Code is considered to be the most enduring of his legacies. That's the point. That's about the judicial reforms. Then Napoleon also carried out the religious reforms. So basically, uh, Napoleon, in a way, inherited the conflict existing between the Catholic Church and the state. This was because during the course of the French Revolution, I just told you, French Revolution broke out in 1789, and thereafterwards, during the course of the revolution till 1799, uh, the the various governments of France between 1789 to 1799, uh, uh, the various governments of France between 1789 to 1799, in a way, uh, took extreme steps against the Catholic Church. This we have already discussed in our previous class. Let me repeat this point once again. The various revolutionary governments that were in power in France between 1789 to 1799 took extreme steps against the Catholic Church in France. So these extreme steps taken up by the revolutionary governments in France deeply hurt the sentiments of the religious citizens in France. So these steps taken by the revolutionary governments in France between 1789 to 1799 had deeply hurt the religious sentiments or sentiments of the religious citizens. That's the point. So basically, Napoleon, when he became the first consul in 1799, inherited the conflict that was going on between the Catholic Church and the state. State means the government. But Napoleon made every possible effort to reduce the gap between the two. And in a way, in fact, he made every possible effort to reduce the gap between the Catholic Church and the state. He did not just make an effort. In fact, he was very successful in bridging the gap between the Catholic Church and the state. It was in this context Napoleon reached an agreement with Pope, and this agreement is called as the Concordat, that was reached in 1801 AD. So basically, Napoleon made an attempt to bridge the gap between the Catholic Church and the state, and in this context, he entered into an agreement with the Pope known as Concordat in 1801 AD. So this Concordat of 1801 AD ended completely the the conflict that was going on between the Catholic Church and the French government. Concordat reached in 1801 AD completely ended the conflict that was going on between the Catholic Church and the state. So this was another of his enduring contributions, another of his enduring legacies of the rule of Napoleon. This was his another enduring legacy of Napoleon. That is Concordat 1801 AD. So what? Take a look at the agreement, the provisions of this Concordat reached in 1801. So under this Concordat, provision 1, it says Catholicism shall be declared as a state religion. Basically, Catholicism was declared as a state religion. And second, state shall appoint, it was agreed between both the sides that the state shall appoint clergy, that is the people associated with the church. The state shall appoint clergy by giving an intimation to the Pope. This provision was accepted between both the church as well as the church. This agreement was agreed to between the Pope and the government. And third, it was agreed that the non-juring clergy who were removed uh, during the period of the revolution shall be reappointed to their position. So those students who are attending this session for the first time, you may not understand the three provisions, but if you want to have a proper understanding, do attend or do listen to my previous lectures on this particular topic, that is the French Revolution. So we have so far completed 4 sessions. We are now discussing the 5th session. For you to have a better understanding of these three provisions, you kindly take a look at first 4 sessions we have had on the French Revolution. Fine. So basically, in simple terms, the conflict that was going on between the Catholic Church and the state since the outbreak of the French Revolution came to an end with this agreement reached in 1801. That's the point. So this agreement is called as the Concordat of 1801. So that's about the internal policies of Napoleon. So basically, I told you that Napoleon's rule as the first consul can be discussed in 2 phases. One is the internal reforms. Basically, as the first consul, Napoleon carried out a series of reforms which can be discussed in two halves. One is the internal reforms, other is the external reform. So what we have discussed so far is the internal reforms. Now come to the external reforms carried out during Napoleon's rule as the first consul. So the point is, when Napoleon became the first consul, uh, when Napoleon was appointed as the first consul, the second coalition was still intact. So the point is the aggressive policy followed by the Directory. I just told you Directory ruled France between 1795 to 1799. So the aggressive policy followed by Directory resulted in the formation of a second coalition in Europe. And this coalition comprised of countries like England, Austria, and Russia. That's the point. So the aggressive policy followed by the Directory resulted in the formation of a second coalition comprising of England, Austria, and Russia. This coalition came into existence. But shortly thereafterwards, disagreements emerged between the three countries of the second coalition. Soon afterwards, disagreements broke out between the three countries of the second coalition, and due to these disagreements, Russia came out of the second coalition. Basically, Russia withdrew from the second coalition because of internal differences between the members of the second coalition. So what remained in the second coalition were countries England and Austria. So their second coalition, the point is when Napoleon became the ruler in 1799, two of the three countries of the second coalition were still active. Russia withdrew from the coalition because of its differences with the other two countries of the second coalition, but two members of the second coalition still remained very active, that is England and Austria. So basically, after becoming the first consul, Napoleon had to face the challenge coming from countries like England and Austria, and therefore immediately he proceeded to tackle the, the external threat to France. So immediately after becoming the first consul, Napoleon began to tackle the external threat to France coming from England as well as Austria. This is what happened. So immediately, first Napoleon turned his attention to Austria and he began his Austrian campaign. We call this as Napoleon's campaign against Austria. So basically, first Napoleon turned his attention to Austria and he began his campaign against Austria. So in this campaign against Austria, Austria was brutally defeated and a treaty was reached known as the Treaty of Lunéville in 1801 AD. So basically in this Austrian campaign, uh, uh, Austria was defeated and then afterwards Austria was forced to enter into a new treaty with France known as the Treaty of Lunéville 1801 AD. So this Treaty of Lunéville had only one provision, that is, Austria shall abide by the provisions of the Treaty of Campo Formio. So what is this Treaty of Campo Formio? I told you way back in 1797 itself, Napoleon, that is the period of directory is 1795 to 1799. So during the period of the directory in France, Napoleon had invaded Austria way back in 1797 itself. So directory was in power, but during the time period of a directory, Napoleon was sent to invade Austria. So Napoleon had successfully invaded Austria. In that invasion, Austria was defeated, and thereafterwards, Austria was forced to enter into a treaty called Treaty of Campo Formio. So the provisions of this Treaty of Campo Formio we have already discussed in our previous class. You just take a look at the treaty, the provisions of the Treaty of Campo Formio. But the point is, later Austria violated the Treaty of Campo Formio. It started violating the provisions of the Treaty of Campo Formio. But in 1801, once again, Austria was invaded by Napoleon. This time also Austria was defeated, and thereafterwards this treaty was forced on Austria. That is the Treaty of Lunéville 1801 AD. Treaty of Lunéville 1801 AD. So what happened in this treaty? Under this treaty, uh, uh, Austria once again agreed to implement all the provisions of Treaty of Campo Formio. The way the point is, Austria agreed for the implementation of the point is, Treaty of Campo Formio was an agreement between France and Austria reached in 1797, but this treaty began to be uh, violated by Austria in course of time. But after this second invasion on Austria, another treaty was reached known as the Treaty of Lunéville. Under this Treaty of Lunéville, Austria agreed to implement all the provisions of Treaty of Campo Formio reached earlier with France in 1797 AD. That's about this particular treaty. So the whole point which I'm trying to convey is this campaign against Austria was a very successful campaign. You remember this particular point. Then the point is, the only country of the second coalition that remained to be defeated by Napoleon was England. I told you the second coalition was formed. The second coalition comprised of England, Austria, and Russia. Russia withdrew from the second coalition. As a result, only Austria and Russia remained. Austria and England remained. But Austria was also defeated in 1801, and therefore the only country of the second coalition that remained that was yet to be defeated by France was England. But the point is, Napoleon knew very well that carrying a direct attack on England is not possible because England had a far superior navy, and therefore direct attack on England was unthinkable for Napoleon. So the point is, Napoleon knew very well that he was absolutely in no position to carry out a direct attack on England, and therefore, without fighting war with England, Napoleon negotiated with England and entered into a peace treaty with it, known as Treaty of Amiens. The Treaty of Amiens, 1802 AD. So the whole point is, in 1802 AD, Napoleon negotiated with England and entered into a peaceful settlement. He did it because he knew very well that carrying out a direct attack on England is not possible. Having realized that fact, he entered into this peace treaty with England. So, with the Treaty of Amiens, Napoleon, so with this treaty, that is the Treaty of Amiens, Napoleon successfully broke the second coalition and thereby averted threat to France and averted an external threat to France. This is what happened. So till 180 by 1802 AD, the entire threat to France from other countries of Europe was successfully averted. So take a look at the achievements of Napoleon in his capacity as first consul. Take a look at the achievements of Napoleon in his capacity as first consul. He carried out a host of internal reforms. In all of these internal reforms, he was very, very successful. He carried out administrative reforms, he carried out economic reforms, he carried out educational reforms, he carried out religious reforms as well. At the point, and importantly, he also carried out judicial reforms as well. So in all the internal reforms, Napoleon was very, very successful, and he also carried out. Point is, he also carried out the the external policies. These are internal policies, and second is external policies. In his external policy, he fought a war with Austria and won it quite successfully. And second, having realized the fact that a direct attack on England is not possible, he entered into a peace treaty with England, and thereby he successfully broke the remains of the second coalition, and thereby he avoided external threat to France. So the whole point which I'm trying to convey is, by 1802 AD, Napoleon became very, very popular in France because of his very successful internal reforms, and as well as his successful handling of external threat to France. So he became, by 1802 AD, Napoleon became very, very popular in France because of his successful implementation of internal reforms as well as the successful handling of external threat to France. This is what happened. This is what happened. At a point. So by 1804, the popularity of Napoleon was an all-time high. Was at an all-time high. So by 1880, by 1804, the popularity of Napoleon was at an all-time high, and this was directly due to his successful implementation of internal reforms, I just told you, as well as handling of external threat to France. So basically, by 1804, he was very, very popular in France. Taking advantage of his popularity, Napoleon declared himself as Emperor of France in 1804 AD. Basically, Napoleon declared himself as Emperor of France in 1804 AD. Thereafterwards, a plebiscite was conducted in which people voted in favor of monarchy in France. People voted in favor of monarchy in France. So the whole point is, in 1789, the revolution broke out in France against monarchy. At a point, people were fed up with the monarchy, and therefore they revolted against monarchy and made France as a republic. This is what happened. But just within 15 years, that is by 1804 AD, people got fed up with numerous experiments in France, and once again they tilted back towards monarchy. They tilted back towards monarchy. This is what happened. So in the coming classes, we will be discussing as to why this happened, what made the people of France to go back to monarchy. That point will be discussed exclusively because that point was asked as question many times in various examinations. So that point will be elaborated further. That's the point. But the whole point which I'm trying to convey is we are now first discussing the overall picture of we are trying to uh, uh, we are now we are trying to have uh, take a look at the overall picture of a French Revolution. Then afterwards, we will be discussing as to how questions may be asked from this topic. That's the point. So that's all for today. We will have one more session on the French Revolution. And that would be our last session. So in the next class, we will discuss the uh, the role of Napoleon as the monarch of France. That is, we will discuss the role of Napoleon as the Emperor of France, and we'll also discuss the policies initiated by France in his capacity as Emperor, and we'll also discuss the factors that led to his fall. How come his rule came to an end in 1815? We'll also be discussing that particular. So we are just left with one single topic from the French Revolution. In the next class, we will be completing that particular part. That's all for today. See you in the next class. But in case if you have any doubts, you may ask questions.